Standardized testing has been elevated so high that it's really come at the cost of the arts, music, all these programs that really draw kids to school and keep them in school. The school that my children go to, which is not a Title I high poverty school, the only way we were able to maintain band and music programming for our students is through parent-funded fundraising.
Here today releasing a report. We've spent the last several months digging through 10 years of school finance data to look at how schools are spending our money and whether the spending trends reflect our values. And so as we look at this, what we're seeing is an increased emphasis on tested subjects, so the things that are showing up on standardized tests are getting a little more investment, and that's coming at the cost of support services like counselors and nurses in schools, and also at the cost of non-tested subjects like arts, computer science, business, any number of what we think of as enriching curriculum, as the stuff besides math and reading, basically.
I'm the author of, or co-author really, of Valuing the Whole Child, Education Beyond Test Scores, which looks at a whole variety of areas of education that go beyond the simple test score based things that are so much the focus of so much of our policy right now.
Spending on those enriching courses that I mentioned dropped $88 million. That's about a 10% drop in the space of 10 years, starting in 2003-2004. We saw spending on our tested subjects, math and English, go up 6%, over $20 million. We saw spending on support services, those nurses, counselors, social workers. We saw that drop about, by the end of the 10 years, it was only down about 5%, but it reached as low as 12% below where it started.
We have subjects in schools called allied arts, and basically to the educational folk, that is a lumped term for all those subjects that are not tested at the state level. Things like facts, family, consumer science, foreign language, physical education, art education, music education, business education. I could go on with 10 others. Some students, and this is probably nowhere more evident than in our middle schools at Anoka Hennepin, we have students taking what we call double scoops of math and reading to try and get their test scores up. But of course that limits then other options they have. It limits them access to the coursework that they would like, that really motivate them, inspire them, and keep them engaged in our schools. And we really need to get back to the funding levels we had in the 80s and 90s in education, because the last 10 to 12 years have devastated a lot of options for kids.
The other thing that we have a huge concern about is the number of support staff. As in the areas that support students with special needs especially, namely counselors, social workers, nurses, and our library and media specialists. When I first started 28 years ago, I worked at a school that had a full-time music teacher, a full-time phy-ed teacher, and full-time science teachers right there in the building. One of the last buildings I worked at, we had no phy-ed teacher, and we were a community school that had a YMCA joined to it. We had the most beautiful gym in the entire city of St. Paul for our elementary students, and no phy-ed teacher to teach them the skills inside that gym. We also had no music specialist in that school. To take a pulse, we realized we had 39,000 kids in St. Paul and only 10 librarians. 10 librarians for 39,000 kids.
I know that many schools do not have a parent body that can afford that, therefore they do not have a band program for their children. There is no strings program. So I feel like access is not equally available across the district. For many of those students, they have no recess time, because the burden on them is to boost those test scores as quickly as possible, and the children are not allowed time to go outside. Again, the school that my children go to has 30 minutes of recess. Ones a mile away have no recess. I think that's a huge problem.
All of that, I do want to say there is some good news. Over the past few years, we've seen an increase in state investment in education that's allowed many districts to start building their way out of the pits they had to dig as they were taking the cuts we describe in this report. And finally, we need a state set of priorities that fully represent the whole child, not just the things that we can test and measure through tests.